This is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and I'm here to take a closer look at Red Heart Fleece Hugs, which is a gorgeous cake yarn from yarnspirations.com. You can see here 2 of these really beautiful colorways, and these 2 are a little bit pastel, but in total there are 12 colorways of this yarn, each featuring 4 colors, and there's a range of neutrals, brights, and pastels. These cakes are perfect for making 1 skein, or if you want to do 2 skeins, baby blankets, and in both knit and crochet. There are several free patterns for it on yarnspirations.com, and we're going to take a closer look at how it works up today. First, let's take a look at Fleece Hugs as it looks in the cake. Here you can see the 4 colors in this particular colorway. We've got gray, a light blue, a darker blue, and sort of a lighter gray, and then we're back to that darker gray. And as I said, most of the cakes, well, all the cakes have 4 colors. Most of them are kind of a subtle change like this, but there are a few brights with some really distinct colors too, like bright reds and blues, a little bit more colorful if you're looking for something a little bit brighter. You can see here already, it's a very, very fuzzy yarn. And you can also see that line that runs through it. So let's take a closer look at the individual strand. Here you can see an individual strand of Red Heart Fleece Hugs. You can see it is a chenille style yarn, and this means that smaller tufts of yarn are twisted between the 2 long strands here, the string that you can see at the bottom. This locks in those tufts of yarn and creates an incredibly soft and fuzzy yarn that is a lot of fun to work with, but doesn't offer much stitch definition. Back here in the cake, you can see it is delightfully squishy, and it really does feel wonderful in the hand. You don't feel the string so much, you mostly just feel that fur, and it really does feel quite lovely. Let's take a closer look at the label here. So you can see it is 100% polyester, and each cake contains 200 grams or 7 ounces, or 415 yards, 380 meters. So that is a pretty good chunk of yarn, over 400 yards. That means you can make these 1-ball blankets, and you can see there's one of them right inside the label. Now that blanket calls for an L, but if we keep turning, we'll kind of skip past that and come back to it here in a minute. You can see that the recommended hook size is an I. So you do have some leeway there to play with it and just see what gives you the fabric that you like best. I find with fuzzy yarns like this, sometimes going with the slightly bigger hook can help make those stitches just a little bit easier to find. But again, everybody's different, so you can give it a whirl and see what you think. So if we keep turning over here, let's see, we can see here, this is the Blue Jay colorway. That is the name of that one, so pretty. And it does have a die lot. So if you're not making one of those 1 skein blankets, you'll want to make sure to pick up enough to finish your project. As we continue around here, you can see that it is a 4 or medium weight yarn. As I mentioned, it takes an I hook, which is a 5.5 millimeter, or a 5 millimeter set of needles. Obviously, there's a little bit of leeway there too, again, just to get the fabric you like. Now, this is a machine wash cold, gentle cycle, tumble dry yarn. So that, again, makes it really great for projects for children and babies. So if we go ahead and pull this label right on off, you can see here a little bit more of that really gorgeous fuzzy yarn there on the side. We'll go ahead and open it up and see what's inside. We should have, there we are, nice big long label here. Yes, we've got the 1-ball gentle ripple crochet baby blanket pattern by Rebecca Venton that we saw on the outside of the label. And that is, again, both in English and in French. So you can get another picture, another look at that blanket right there and see another one of those really beautiful colorways. Now here's a crochet swatch that I worked up using the Red Heart Fleece Hugs. Now I didn't put any sort of stitch pattern in this other than just simple double crochet and half double crochet stitches. And as you can see, you can't even really tell what kind of stitch it was. So when you're working into a yarn like this, I recommend that you do find patterns sort of like the one on the label, where they use negative space or, some lace work essentially to create the pattern inside it. Or of course, you can just make a really solid, fuzzy, gorgeous piece. One tip that I have for working with these yarns is that you do use a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of every row or round, and that will just help you make sure you're not accidentally missing one of those stitches at the end, which is even easier to do when you have a fuzzy yarn like this. The other thing I recommend is that you do work in a brightly lit environment, sort of like this one right here with a nice light table or surface or even just a pillowcase on your lap, something like that, and that will help you see through those stitches a little bit as well. Then when it's time to take those stitches, you just want to sort of use your hook and feel for where you know that stitch should be. If you've been crocheting for a while, you know approximately how far apart these stitches are. You can see, okay, I should have another stitch right about there. And indeed, if you feel that stitch, you can feel right along the post, right up to the top, and sort of just put that hook right where it wants to go on through. Now, this yarn does slide beautifully on the hook and needles. I've tried it with plastic and with metal and with wood, and it has worked really beautifully with all of them. And although it is very fuzzy, it frogs really well too. You just do want to take your time a little bit and make sure that you pull out each stitch individually rather than just ripping it wildly. Now here's a knit swatch that I've worked up in this yarn. And again, you can just barely tell really that I did it in garter stitch, but you can see how really beautifully these colors just sort of blend right into the other. It's not so much a gradual change, but the closest of the colors in this colorway really do make it just kind of subtle in a way, even though it's very clear to see one's gray and one's blue. I really enjoyed knitting with this one as well as crocheting with it. And I think if anything, knitting with it is just a little bit easier because you can see those individual stitches on your needles. However, there isn't any stretch in this yarn either, since it is a polyester, with a chenille style polyester specifically. So that is, that sort of evens it out, shall we say, between the two. So again, you'll just want to make sure and take your time and go through each one of those stitches, because with that fuzzy yarn, it is a little bit trickier just to see exactly where you're going. But it really does create a gorgeous squishy fabric. You can see right here. And I didn't find, I don't think you could split it since it is a string with fuzz, essentially. There's not a plied strand there to split. And of course, frogging or tinking it worked fine. I only used one skein of it to make my finished project. But so again, you want to make sure and get enough of your dye lot to complete your project from project to project. I also didn't find any thin, lumpy, or tied bits in this yarn. It was very consistent for me. And of course, it's already fuzzy, so it's going to be fuzzy for the life of the project. As you can see, it's worked out beautifully in both crochet and knitting, and honestly, you can't really tell which one you've done. So you just need to find the pattern that works for you. In terms of beginners, it's going to be a little bit easier for those beginner knitters because they can see those individual stitches. As opposed to the crocheters, you might need to have just a little bit more experience so that you know where those stitches are going to go. Now, this is a pattern that I've designed for Yarnspirations.com, which features one cake of Red Heart fleece hugs. I used the elephant colorway, which kind of makes me think of pink elephants with this gorgeous corally pink stripe in here. You can see it's got some lighter grays and darker grays, and here you can see it worked up, although it's a little bit big, even though it's a baby blanket, a little bit big for my table. The fun of these cakes, of course, is that it just depends where in the cake you want to begin. You can choose to work from the outside or from the inside, and you're going to get a slightly different layout for every project, even when it's something as simple as this one. So that's a little bit about Red Heart Fleece Hugs. It's a lot of fun and a great one cake project type of yarn. I hope you'll give it a try, and thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and have a great day.